Free wherever you get your news.
You can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
Hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. So we'll see what's making the headlines. Joining us from now until just before midnight is Steve and Salma. Welcome to both of you. So let's see what's making the front pages then, shall we? Starting with the Financial Times, leading with the news of US President Donald Trump's threat to impose a 100% tariff on Russian goods if the war in Ukraine does not end within 50 days. The Telegraph also covers that story, looking at the tariffs China will face if Putin does not agree to a ceasefire. On the front page of The Guardian is the same story, the paper reflecting on the US President's meeting with the NATO Secretary-General. Well, the Metro hits out against the arrogance of monster parents Constance Martin and Mark Gordon after they were convicted of the death of their newborn baby, Victoria. The front page of the Daily Mail focuses on the Martin and Gordon's other children who were taken into care. The Daily Express looks ahead to the Chancellor's speech tomorrow, claiming the government's next tax raid will pick the pockets of the grafters. And the Star leads with the confusion among Chelsea players as Donald Trump appeared to join in with the team's Club World Cup celebrations. Trumpian, they say, goes the chant. So we are joined by the columnist and broadcaster Steve Richards and the former Conservative Special Advisor Salma Shah. Lovely to see both of you. Some big hitting stories, certainly. Donald Trump leading a number of newspapers. The FT taking the tariffs line on this, but this is tariffs and weapons, isn't it, Steve?
Yeah, it's a really big and interesting shift. See, when he was being nice to Putin early on, lots of people said, what hold has Putin got over Trump? I don't think Putin had any hold over Trump. I think Trump calculated that being nice to Putin, being seen being stroppy with Zelensky, would encourage Putin to move towards the peace deal, which Trump at one point claimed he could do in a day. It wasn't working. So he shifted quite dramatically to this economic threats, military threats, and instead of being nice, he's trying something else. And the interesting question, well, there are many interesting questions, is what if this doesn't work, that the 50-day deadline passes? But he's decided being soft on Putin hasn't worked, obviously. The war is still carrying on. And so this is a very significant shift in tactics to try and get Putin into agreeing a ceasefire or a peace deal. And for Trump, it's a big moment because he's so far wooed him. And so he's had to change in a quite significant way. Absolutely.
And Volodymyr Zelensky thanking Mr. Trump for that this evening. I mean, two domestic issues were quite interesting in this too. First of all, the MAGA movement is quite isolationist and does not want the Trump administration to give weapons for free, hence this via NATO purchasing American weapons thing. And the other domestic matter was the intervention of Melania in all of this.
Yes, I mean, this is quite incredible given that there are so many rumours that abound and sort of, memes on social media about whether Melania really truly exists in the White House or not. But according to some reports, the president, would go home after saying that...
According to him twice today, to be fair.
Yeah, saying that, he'd go home and talk to her and say, he's had a very sort of positive conversation with President Putin, and she'd be like, OK, have you had a look at the TV? He's still bombing Kiev and Ukraine. So I think actually an interesting insight into the life of the president and actually how he is governed and how he does make his decisions. So well done, Melania, in this case.
And in terms of, what happens now, there's deadlines again. It throws it into the future. Some people say, why are we looking, weeks away again? But what does President Putin do about it? Are we effectively saying that the effort of a peace deal, they said they came close 4 times today with Mark Rutte, NATO Secretary-General, is that now dead?
I mean, here's the thing. Putin is a grand strategist. So we know that he has been sort of playing all these different characters and people around on the international stage for a long time. And presumably he had already predicted, the president's erratic behaviour. Whether he thought that he would go this far or whether he thinks he's actually going to follow through with any of this remains to be seen. But we always knew, and we've talked about this on this programme, about the fact that it's got to be a negotiated end. So what is the president of the United States willing to give the president of Russia to bring peace to Ukraine? Is it going to be the border as it currently stands with a Russian occupation in sovereign territory, or is it going to be something else?
Yes, and Zelensky's statement tonight, praises the strategy of peace through strength, which isn't what we know Trump believes in. Daily Telegraph as well has gone from the tariff perspective. Trump threatens China over Russian oil, threatened to punish Russia's main trading partners with 100% tariffs if Vladimir Putin does not sign a peace deal to end the war in 50 days. This idea of isolating them, not just militarily, but also economically as well.
Yeah, and really hammering them. So he's going for their main customers as well. And so, he's playing for high stakes. And the 50 days, I assume, is to test the degree to which this might work. But in a way, it returns now closer to the situation with Biden, who took a very aggressive stance against Putin. It didn't work. That's why Trump tried the alternative.
He did, but he was slow in delivering some of the weapons that Ukraine was asking for.
That is true, but it was absolutely clear whose side Biden was on. It's been ambiguous with Trump. Now it's moving closer to a different place. And
it's not just moved, there's a total volte-face.
It was a volte-face,
This is a 180-degree turn, so all of a sudden...
Even praise from the four European allies.
Which is, when you think about what happened in the Oval Office, in the White House with Zelensky when he went over and J.D. Vance and the president, this is just completely different, different.
Because then I think, he was trying out a technique, which is to sort of say to Putin, look, I'm not like Biden, who is just with this guy. I could be quite tough on this guy, but you deal with me. And he hasn't. So he's gone. But the worry is when it was kind of Biden, Europe, Zelensky together, it didn't end it. So what is the ending of this?
If this is the made-for-TV president, though, I mean, this is very much going to end up with a jumping the shark episode, like in Happy Days. You know, where does this actually go? You have to have some level of consistency in international affairs. Otherwise, how does anybody know that you're serious? Yeah. And I think that this is an interesting tactic. Let's see if it pays off in 50 days, or are we going to have another taco situation?
And for Ukraine, who have watched Israel with its Iron Dome and other mechanisms to defend its skies, the fact that they are shipping Patriot air defence batteries is absolutely critical. The US president saying they'd start arriving in Ukraine within days. Mr Rutte listed Germany, Norway, Denmark, Sweden, Finland and Canada as the countries participating in the scheme. Berlin has offered to buy 2 Patriot batteries. They then ship them to Ukraine. So that's how the system works. Norway has said it would purchase 1 of the American-made systems and so on. So, that will be crucial in defending what is now, enormous quantities of drone and missile attacks that are coming in. That's the point, isn't it?
Yes.
They've stepped up their drone attacks.
And not just that, it's the fact that actually, it's actually in the FT that this has been one of the most lethal months recorded since the war began. So I think we have to recognise that this is not just a question of, firing in to try and make a point around a negotiation. This is still really an exceptionally deadly situation.
Yes, and the FT also saying, well, Kyiv's interception rate is high, often above 70%. Dozens of drones and several missiles get past its air defences in each attack. The Guardian, as well, Trump issues warning to Putin as he does a deal with NATO to arm Kyiv. Does this mean, aside from his volte-face in terms of Zelensky and Putin, that he now believes in NATO? Is that the other significance of this, do you think?
Well, I suspect that the ambiguity in relation to NATO is still in place. But he has persuaded NATO members to massively increase defence spending, in theory at least. I wonder whether it will happen in practice. In theory, it's going to go up to 5% in the coming years. I wonder about that. He is now recommitted because he thinks NATO members are going to deliver that budget increase. But what is interesting is a lot of cliches have been whirling around this terrible, terrible conflict, like Putin must be defeated. Well, what does that mean? And Ukraine must win. Well, we know in theory what that means. Ukraine gets all the territory back that Zelensky claims it wants. Well, Putin's not going to agree to anything close to that. He's not going to withdraw. So how this ends is still far from clear. But this is a huge, as Salma says, a huge U-turn from Trump in his approach to Putin.
I wonder about going to break a little bit early, actually, to do justice to the Constance Martin, Mark Gordon story about their baby who died, their 4 other children taken into care, and the Daily Mail revealing why that happened. So we'll come back with that after this break.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles. Sky News.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the press preview, joined again by Steve Richards and Salma Shah. Welcome back to you. So let's go to the Daily Mail, an 8-page special. From our unrivaled team of crime reporters, it says. But anyway, the fascinating case of this aristocrat, Constance Martin, and her partner, Mark Gordon, and the revelations that, one, obviously, they had a young child who died. Nobody knows exactly how old it was. But they had 4 other children taken into care. And the Mail has found out why they were taken into care amid many extraordinary revelations.
Yeah, I think there's the sentence on the front page of the Mail that really sums this up, is that it's a case that defies belief because of the background of Constance Martin, who comes from a very privileged aristocratic family. And I think that it sort of sums up the fact that one can't make necessarily predictions on the way something's going to go based on that. But there are some really harrowing details in this piece and in this story more generally. Firstly, obviously, they've been convicted for the death through negligence of their newborn baby, but a history of domestic violence and certainly of sexual violence of Mark Gordon from the age of 14 in the US, where he had been living with his family at the time. And there are lots of questions to be asked, particularly around what sort of details were available in court and at what point were these details revealed about Mark Gordon.
Well, we don't tell jurors previous convictions, do we? But if they are so serious, and he was an extradited felon, America extradited him back to the UK.
Yeah. But it's interesting, just on that point, the Telegraph have also covered this story. And there was reference
felon. America
and they're
extradited him back to the
case.
UK.
Yeah,
yeah.
But it's interesting, just on that point, the Telegraph have also covered this story, and when their other 4 children were taken into care, there was reference to domestic abuse of Constance Martin, potential domestic abuse of Constance Martin, and the judge in that case said that in good conscience that she could not allow these children to stay, in these circumstances, and then therefore put them up for adoption. There are going to be a lot of people asking questions as to how this happened, why this happened, and quite often we get into a situation where we start blaming agencies and we start asking questions about where that support was. There has been a lot of support, a lot of agencies, a lot of sort of government support on this case, a lot of people who've behaved in the right way and tried to do the right thing in order to protect these children. There are some really horrible details in the Telegraph about how, these parents who were just unable to get their chaotic lives together left their children inconsolable when they wouldn't turn up to prearranged contact meetings. And the family of Constance Martin, who, according to some of the other reports in the Mail, did try to provide financial assistance. So this is not a couple that were without support, that were without means, that were without advice. And for this to have ended up in such a tragedy with the loss of such an innocent young life, I think is going to be pretty harrowing for a lot of people to get their head around.
Yes, and the newspaper's trying to track down why the other 4 children were taken into care. And the Daily Mail listing the fact that Constance Martin seemed to suffer a shattered spleen in a suspected domestic abuse incident when she was 14 weeks pregnant. The suggestion is she fell out of the first floor of a building. And then he said, Mark Gordon said, we both fell out, but I happened to land on my feet. We were fixing an aerial. And she said, I didn't have any injuries. And yet she had a shattered spleen, on treatment. So, I mean, there's all extraordinary details coming out about this case.
Extraordinary details, but also some of them showing how hard it is when you are the investigator or the social worker. As Salma says, quite a lot of things were done, like 4 children were taken into care after this emerged. But she was denying it. So how do you prove it?
And they were living off grid, in tents, moving around, not staying in one council area.
It becomes very, very difficult. And, some of the fascination, and on the front page of the Telegraph, I think we might see it in a moment, you have the photo of Constance Martin. And normally in these circumstances, I'm sure it'll come up shortly, anyway, she's celebrating on the beach, drinking, there she is. Now, normally in these cases, you expect to see a photo of some grim housing situation as part of the explanation of some terrible sequence of events. And she, as the Mail put it, is the killer aristocrat. Now, I have to say, aristocrats have killed before. I mean, this is a bleak thing, but they're not immune from crime. Some aristocrats, I'm not saying all of them, please, but some of them have done it before. But that's part of the fascination, the background. But also issues are raised. In one of the reports, there is the defence at one point, because of the information that had emerged about Mark Gordon, at one point called for the whole trial to be stop. So it raises, again, the information that's available to a jury, the degree to which a trial becomes jeopardised when information is emerged. There's all that side of it. And there is also the questions, although it's clearly complex, about why more surveillance wasn't done in the light of the horrors when 4 of the kids were taken into care. So it is multi-layered, but I suspect the extent of the coverage is down to the killer aristocrat.
Yes, indeed, and this is her 2009. It's actually the Egyptian desert, as she posted classic toots, which was her friend's nickname for her, on a photograph of her holding an iced coffee in the Egyptian desert. But that is a gilded life lost, that picture says, does it not? Steve, Salma, thank you both very much indeed. Thank you.